We have not been given your request. All we've had to go on is what we've heard. With each option, I know that you requested, you tied it to a risk factor. Now, when I was in Afghanistan in August and we met, I mentioned that I know you had been given certain direction from the Secretary and from others, and I asked you directly if that was going to influence the request that you made of the Commander-in-Chief. You told me no. You said you had a moral obligation to ask for what you needed to be successful in the mission. As I mentioned, Congress has not had the opportunity to review your troop request. We were able to read the original assessment that you sent, but I have the highest level of confidence that you adhered to your word and asked for what you thought you needed, given your best military judgment, to be successful. General, can you tell this committee and the American people what were the different force options you requested and the degree of risk that was tied to those requests?
Congressman, that is still a classified document, so I'm unable to go into detail, but I can certainly go into the process, and I'd like to do that. When we completed the initial assessment, we went into a resource analysis, which we called it, which is the classified document. And in that, as I outlined to you during your visit, we identified different force packages with associated risk based upon our assessments of that. And then I said that I would also make a recommendation, technically not a request at that point, but a very direct recommendation of my chain of command on what the appropriate force level was. And I did that. Through this process then, when that went into the President's assessment and decision-making process, what I was very pleased about is, beginning with my initial assessment, I was not only encouraged to be candid and straightforward, I was demanded to be candid and straightforward. So as we went forward with what was then in the resource analysis, and that became part of what was considered in the President's assessment, throughout that process, which was exchange of different documents and then a series of secure VTCs, in every case I was able to make my recommendations or my analysis, and they would come back for more detailed rationale so that I could explain that. I thought it was a very healthy exchange, as Ambassador Eikenberry laid out, getting everything on the table, getting everybody very clear on where we were. And what I think came out of that was, as we focused on the mission, the understanding of the mission, I believe that the President's decision reflects resources that are congruent with what I recommend we needed. So I'm very comfortable with the outcome, resource-wise, of what was made in the process.
General, would you be willing to, in a classified session with the committee, give us what you asked for?
Absolutely, sir.
And let me now frame the question in a little different way in public. Did you ask for 30,000 troops in 2010?
I asked for forces to be deployed as quickly as they could be deployed. And as the flow worked out, that was going to be about that in 2010, but I didn't ask it that way, sir.
Thank you, General. Did you recommend that the troops begin withdrawal by July 2011?
I did not recommend anything to do with, I made no recommendations at all on that.
In your judgment, does the deployment of 30,000 troops to the eastern and southern parts of the country and the 18-month timeline provide the least risk and most opportunity for success compared to the other options you gave to the Commander-in-Chief?
I believe that nothing in this is without risk, as you said, with least risk. So I think it's appropriate risk. What I'd like to do is give the wider context of this. as we look at our partnership with Afghanistan from now through the strategic partnership that the President and the Secretary of Defense have discussed, in the long term, what in fact we have done is provided the Afghans the assurance that we are going to be strategic partners with them. Now, that likely will not involve combat forces. It will involve different things over time, but it's a very important part of the long-term commitment to them. And if you are in the insurgency, that is also a very difficult fact to deal with, because it essentially makes the insurgent long-term approach not viable. If you come to near term, the President has just announced 30,000 additional U.S. forces, and we expect to get some range of additional coalition forces. So starting very quickly, beginning this month actually with deployment, we will have a significant the increased force on the ground that's going to allow us to turn the momentum, both actual momentum on the ground and momentum in the eyes of the Afghan people, over about the next 18 months. I believe the next 18 months are the critical period in this war, because I believe they're critical in the minds of the Afghan people and in the minds of the insurgency. So I believe that the resources we've been provided, along with the strategy which we have already started implementing, and the resolve reflected by the support of the American people and our other coalition allies, I believe for this 18 months we're going to make tremendous progress against this while we simultaneously grow Afghanistan's capacity to provide for its own security. That then bridges to the long term. So I'm very comfortable where we are now as we go out toward the strategic partnership, and I don't believe the July 2011 timeframe militarily is a major factor in my strategy. I do want to say up front, there are people who will grab onto that, I think inappropriately, and they will try to use it in information operations and describe it as something that it is not, in terms of a lack of commitment on the part of the U.S. and the coalition, because we've committed to a long-term partnership. But I think we can deal with that. And on the positive, it is a bit of a forcing function. By being very clear to all the players involved that we are going to be looking hard at things, it provides a forcing function and an impetus for moving forward for the Afghans and others to continue to make progress toward their own capacity.
Thank you. And finally, General, I know we moved the additional forces in earlier this year. I believe they began arriving in April, May, June, and we began an offensive July 1st. You've had time now to assess that. It's almost what we're projecting for next year. We'll have forces arriving, some this month and some early next year. And then we're looking to another review next December. So based on how you assess the effort this year and then the increased effort next year, will you feel good about being able to assess for another review next December of how we're doing to date?
I will, and of course we will do constant assessments as we do to see where we are. But I actually think the progress already being made by the forces approved in March and by the other steps we've taken in how we operate are cumulative with the additional forces that will start flowing in. And we're actually going to start earlier this year than those that were approved in March. And we're going to try to flow these initial forces and employ them as quickly as we can. So I actually think that by December we will have had more time to mature our thinking and show real progress. And I'm confident that we will.